Welcome to the Crow's Tavern. Tonight, we'll journey back to the time of the Norse people, exploring their villages, customs, and daily lives as we drift toward peaceful sleep together. After our story ends, you'll hear the gentle sounds of a crackling fire that will continue for hours without interruption. These soothing sounds will help guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Now let us begin our journey into the Viking world and allow the ancient tales to carry you towards slumber. The mists of Niflheim curled around Baldur's feet like tendrils of memory, neither warm nor cold, but existing in that strange space between sensation that only the dead can truly comprehend. He stood upon the northern shore, his once golden hair now silvered by the moonlight that seemed to emanate not from above, but from the landscape itself. The river Gjöll flowed before him, its waters neither swift nor still, carrying whispers and reflections rather than stones and leaves. Baldur had not expected consciousness after his death. The mistletoe arrow that pierced his heart should have been the end of all thought, all perception. Yet here he stood, aware of himself and the journey that awaited him. Perhaps this was Frigg's final gift to her beloved son, this moment of clarity before descending into Helheim's eternal embrace. The living call it the death road, came a voice like autumn leaves rustling across stone. But those who walk it know it as the path of remembrance. Baldur turned to find a pale figure standing where moments before there had been only mist, neither man nor woman, but something between and beyond, its form shifting subtly with each breath of wind. Only the eyes remained constant, deep wells of midnight blue that held the quiet wisdom of countless crossings witnessed. "You are my guide?" Baldur asked, his voice sounding strange to his own ears, resonant in ways it had never been in life. The figure inclined what might have been its head. "I am a voice for the voiceless, a memory for the forgotten. I walk with those who must cross Gjöll's waters. Some call me Nastron, the shore of corpses," Baldur translated, feeling no fear at the name. Fear, it seemed, belonged to the living. What he felt instead was a profound curiosity, the kind that comes when all urgency has been stripped away by death's patient hand. Nastron gestured toward the river with a rippling movement. "The waters of Gjöll hold the reflections of all who have crossed before you. Look closely, and you may see faces you once knew." Baldur approached the riverbank. The ground beneath his feet transitioned from frozen earth to small, smooth stones that seemed to sigh as he walked upon them. At the water's edge, he knelt and gazed into the gently undulating surface. At first, he saw only his own reflection, familiar yet altered, the marks of life's struggles smoothed away, leaving something essential and unadorned. Then, as if responding to his attention, the water's surface began to shift. Faces formed in the ripples. Some he recognized immediately, others took longer to place in the halls of his memory. "My mother's handmaidens," he murmured, seeing the gentle faces of those who had served Frigg faithfully. "They died in the great winter before the last." "The river remembers all who cross," Nastron said, standing just behind Baldur's shoulder. "It is the first gift of Helheim, to be remembered." As Baldur watched, the faces changed again. Now he saw warriors he had known, men and women who had fallen in battle, but had not been chosen for Valhalla. Their expressions were not of disappointment or regret, but of a profound peace that Baldur found unexpectedly comforting. "I had thought," he began, then hesitated. The all who did not feast in Odin's hall must suffer, Nostron completed his thought. It is a living fear, not a dead truth. Helheim holds no punishment for ordinary lives. It is simply the next place. Balder rose to his feet, a new understanding settling around him like a cloak. Then I am ready to cross. Nastrond nodded toward the distance, where a pale arch rose from the mists spanning the dark waters. Gialabru awaits, but be warned. The bridge tests all who seek passage. It is not your strength that will carry you across, but your willingness to leave strength behind. Together they walked along the shore, the soft lapping of the waters against the banks creating a rhythm like distant drums. Occasionally shapes moved beneath the surface, not threatening but watchful, the denizens of Diol, Balder supposed, witnessing yet another passage from one existence to the next. As they approached Gialabru, its true nature became clearer. The bridge was constructed not of stone or wood, but of something that seemed to exist between substance and spirit. It gleamed with a frost that never melted, and each footfall upon its surface rang out with a tone that seemed to echo far beyond the physical world. And at the foot of the bridge stood a figure so still that Balder initially mistook her for a statue. Tall and slender, clothed in grey that shifted between fabric and mist, she held a staff of polished bone that stood taller than herself. Her face, when she finally turned it toward the approaching travelers, held the solemn beauty of a winter's first snowfall. Modgud, Nastrond acknowledged with what might have been a bow. Guardian of Gialabru, I bring Baldur, son of Odin and Frigg, slain by mistletoe and blind intention. Modgudder's eyes, the pale blue of ice over deep water, studied Baldur with neither judgment nor welcome. Many have come seeking passage, she said, her voice like distant wind through stone corridors. Kings and thralls, warriors and peace weavers, all must answer before crossing. She shifted her staff, and suddenly it was as if a curtain had been drawn back from reality itself. The mists parted, and Baldur could see across the bridge to the far shore. A landscape of subtle beauty, neither the harsh glory of Asgard nor the vibrant richness of Midgard, but something more essential than either. What do you bring with you, Baldur Odinson? Modgudder asked. For only those who carry the right burdens may cross Gialabru. Baldur considered the question carefully. In life he had carried many things. Responsibilities as a god, his mother's fierce protection, the love of his wife Nanna, the respect of the Aesir. But in death, what remained? I bring only myself, he answered finally. All else belongs to the living world. A flicker of what might have been approval crossed Modgudder's timeless face. And what do you leave behind? This question struck deeper. What was he leaving behind? His divine status? The prophecies that had surrounded his birth and death? The grief of those who mourned him? I leave behind fear, Baldur said, the answer rising to his lips with unexpected certainty. The fear that shaped my final days, when all of Asgard sought to protect me from the fate that found me anyway. Modgudrun nodded slowly. Fear belongs to the living. It has no place beyond Gialabru. She stepped aside, opening the path to the bridge, but raised her staff before Baldur could step forward. The crossing is not yet granted. Gialabru itself must accept your passage. Baldur looked to Nastrond, who had remained silently observant during this exchange. The guide offered what might have been a smile, though on its shifting features, expressions were difficult to interpret with certainty. The bridge knows the heart better than the heart knows itself, Nastront explained. Step forward with truth and the way will open. With a deep breath, he no longer physically needed but found comforting as a remnant of life, Balder approached the foot of the bridge. The frost-covered surface seemed to pulse with a light that responded to his proximity, rippling outward like concentric circles in still water. The first step onto Gjallarbrú rang out with a clear bell-like tone that echoed far longer than natural acoustics should allow. The sound seemed to travel not just through air, but through time itself, resonating with moments long past and perhaps those yet to come. The second step brought a change to the very substance of the bridge beneath his feet. What had appeared solid now seemed to flow like water made rigid by some temporary enchantment, holding his weight but reminding him of its fundamentally transient nature. By the third step, the mists had risen to envelop him completely, and Balder found himself no longer able to see Nastrond or Modgujur behind him, nor the distant shore ahead. He was surrounded by pearlescent whiteness that seemed to contain all colors and none. Balder! The whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, a voice he recognized immediately despite the centuries that had passed since he had last heard it. Grandfather? He responded, turning in place, though there was nothing to see but mist. The voice of Bor, father of Odin, who had passed into Helheim long before Baldur's birth, continued as if from a great distance. You come earlier than was foretold. Prophecies are for the living, Baldur replied, repeating what he had so recently learned. I am here now as I am meant to be. A sound like soft laughter surrounded him. Wisdom comes quickly to you in death. Perhaps that is why you were beloved in life. The mists shifted, thinning in places to reveal not Gjallarbrú beneath his feet, but scenes from his own past, moments of significance that had shaped the god he had become. Balder saw himself as a child, learning wisdom at Frigg's knee. He witnessed his own marriage to Nanna, her face radiant with a love that had sustained them both through centuries. He observed councils of the Aesir, where his voice had brought reason to heated debates. Do you regret leaving them? Bor's voice asked. Balder considered this as the images continued to flow around him. Regret is another burden I must leave behind, he finally answered. What was, was. What will be? The mists thickened again, obscuring the visions, but somehow feeling warmer, more approving. Balder continued walking, though he had no way to know if he was still following Gjallarbrú's path or wandering in some liminal space between worlds. Then he heard it, the sound of water lapping against stone, but with that same otherworldly resonance that had characterized every sound in this strange journey. He was approaching the far bank of Gjoll, though the mist still concealed it from view. Before he could take another step, the whiteness before him coalesced into a form both familiar and heart-wrenching. Nanna stood there, exactly as she had on the morning of his death, her eyes filled with the love that had defined their existence together. My husband, she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality he had adored. You travel where I cannot follow. Balder stopped, his hand instinctively reaching toward her before he caught himself. You live still, he said softly. This is but an illusion of Gjallarbrú. Her smile held infinite sadness. Does that make it less real, less true? The bridge shows what the heart most needs to resolve before crossing. I would have you live fully, Balder told her, his voice steady despite the emotions flooding through him. My journey is set upon its path, but yours continues in the lands of light and air. And when my time comes, she asked, will you wait for me beyond Gialabru? Balder smiled then, feeling a certainty that transcended the confusion of this liminal place. Time flows differently in Helhelm, or so the stories say. Perhaps for me, you will arrive but moments after I do. Though years or centuries may pass in Midgard, Nanna's form began to dissolve back into mist, but her smile remained visible longest of all. Then I shall live fully until we meet again, my beloved. As the last trace of her disappeared, the mists parted completely, revealing that Balder stood now just steps from the far side of Gialabru. The shore beyond was neither desolate nor forbidding as living tales often depicted it. Instead, it held a austere beauty. Silver-leafed trees growing alongside crystalline streams, mountains of deep blue stone rising in the distance, and the soft illumination of neither sun nor moon, but something uniquely Helheim's own. Standing at the end of the bridge was Nastrond, seemingly having crossed by some other means to await him. Beside the guide stood a woman of commanding presence, tall and half-shadowed, her face a perfect balance between devastating beauty and terrible solemnity. Hela, Balder acknowledged, recognizing the ruler of Helheim, though they had never met before this moment. She inclined her head slightly, neither submission nor condescension, but simple recognition between powers. Balder Odin's son, your arrival has been long awaited. You knew I would come? He asked, finally stepping off Gialabru and onto the shore of Helheim proper. I'll come here eventually, she replied, her voice like the deepest notes of a stone harp. Even gods, though few make the crossing with such clarity. Nastrond moved to stand beside Balder. He answered Modgudrid truly, and crossed Gialabru without faltering. Hela studied him with eyes older than most of creation. Then you are welcome to Helheim, not as prisoner, but as one who belongs. The realm responds to those who enter it willingly. As if to demonstrate this truth, the landscape around them seemed to shift subtly, the colors deepening, the distant mountains drawing slightly closer, as if the very fabric of Helheim were adjusting to acknowledge Balder's presence and acceptance. Come, Hela said, turning toward a path that led away from the river between stands of the silver-leaved trees. There is much to show you, and eternity in which to learn it. As they walked away from Galba, Baldur felt a strange lightness, not the absence of physical form, for he still possessed something that approximated his living body, but the unburdening of spirit that comes from complete acceptance. Death had not been an ending, but a transition, and the path ahead, while unknown, held its own form of peace. The sound of the river gradually faded behind them, replaced by new sounds. The soft sighing of wind through unusual foliage. The distant calls of creatures neither living nor dead, but existing in Helheim's unique state of being. And eventually, as they approached what appeared to be a vast hall carved from the side of a mountain, the sound of countless voices engaged in quiet conversation. The Hall of Waiting, Hela explained as they approached. Here dwell those who have crossed Gjöll before you. Kings and shepherds, warriors and poets, the renowned and the forgotten. In Helheim, old hierarchies mean little. It is what one becomes after death that matters here. The massive doors of the hall stood open, revealing a space larger within than should have been possible, illuminated by thousands of small flames that burned with a clear, unwavering light. People moved throughout the vast chamber, some in groups engaged in earnest discussion, others alone in contemplation, many occupied with crafts or arts that they perhaps had never had time to master in life. The Baldur seem content, Baldur observed, surprised by the atmosphere that was neither jubilant like Valhalla nor tormented as darker tales of the underworld suggested. Contentment is the gift of acceptance, Hela replied. Those who fight against their fate find Helheim oppressive. Those who accept it discover the freedom that comes after surrender. As they passed through the entrance, many of the hall's occupants looked up, some with recognition in their eyes. A few approached, men and women from different eras and lands, their clothing and appearance as diverse as their presumed origins. "The Bright One comes at last," said an elderly man with the bearing of a king, though he wore simple robes rather than royal regalia. "The whispers have spoken of your arrival for many passings of Gel's tides. You know me?" Baldur asked, surprised. A woman stepped forward, her eyes holding wisdom that suggested she had been a Volva or Cirrus in life. "All know the son of Frigg, whose death marks the beginning of the end. The question that has occupied our discussions is whether your coming hastens Ragnarok, or merely signals its inevitable approach." Hela raised a hand, silencing further questions with a gesture that brooked no defiance. "Baldur comes not as harbinger but as citizen of Helheim. The concerns of living realms remain with the living. Here we exist beyond such matters." The gathered spirits accepted this pronouncement without protest, though Baldur could see in many faces that questions remained. He found himself curious as well. What role did his death truly play in the coming of Ragnarok? Was his presence in Helheim part of some greater design, or merely the natural consequence of his untimely end? But such questions, he realized, belonged to his old existence. Here in Helheim, different truths held sway. Perhaps understanding would come with time, or perhaps the very nature of his concerns would transform as he adjusted to this new reality. Nastrond, who had remained a silent presence throughout their entry to the hall, now spoke. "The newly arrived are given time to acclimate before finding their place among us. Some choose solitude, others community. All find, eventually, the path that suits their nature." "And what is my path to be?" Baldur asked, looking between his guide and the ruler of this realm. Ella's expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of compassion beneath her regal demeanor. "That, Odinson, is for you to discover. Unlike Valhalla, where purpose is prescribed, or Folkvanga, where renewal is imposed, Helheim allows each soul to find its own meaning. It is both our harshest demand and our greatest gift." With these words, she turned and moved deeper into the hall, her form gradually blending with the shadows until she was no longer visible, leaving Baldur with Nastrond and the curious spirits who had greeted their arrival. "Come," said Nastrond, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the vast space. "Rest. Reflect. The crossing of Gjol requires more of the spirit than most realize. In time, your place here will become clear to you." Baldur followed, aware of the eyes that tracked his movement, some curious, others knowing, as if certain residents of Helheim understood aspects of his situation that remained mysterious to him. He found himself led to a small alcove set into the wall of the hall, furnished simply with a stone bench and a small flame burning in a carved niche. "I will leave you to your thoughts," Nastrond said. "When you wish for company or guidance, speak my name to the flame, and I will return." Left alone, Balder settled onto the bench and allowed himself to fully inhabit this moment of transition. The flame before him burned with the same clear, steady light as all the others in the hall, neither consuming fuel nor producing smoke. Like everything in Helheim, it existed in a state that defied the natural laws of the living world. As he watched its unwavering dance, Balder felt the last vestiges of his attachment to life gradually releasing their hold. The grief he had carried for his own death, not for himself but for those left behind, began to transmute into something more like acceptance. The questions that had seemed so urgent just moments ago receded in importance. In their place came a profound sense of presence. Here, now, in this moment between moments, Balder existed without the weight of prophecy or expectation. Whatever his death might mean for the 9 realms, whatever Ragnarok might bring in some distant or imminent future, he was simply himself, no longer a god to be protected or mourned, but a consciousness experiencing the next phase of existence. With this realization came an unexpected peace, deeper than any he had known in life. Baldur closed his eyes, not to sleep, for the dead have no need of sleep, but to simply be fully present in the eternal now of Helheim. How long he remained in this state of contemplation, Baldur could not have said. Time in Helheim flowed differently, with rhythms more like tides than the measured progress of days and seasons in the living realms. He became aware gradually of a presence nearby. Not Nastrond returned, but someone else, someone whose essence carried a familiar resonance. Opening his eyes, Balder found himself facing a woman seated on the opposite end of his stone bench. Her features were those of advanced age, deeply lined with wisdom rather than wear, her silver hair elaborately braided in a style that had been common among wise women in Midgard centuries ago. "You do not know me," she said, before he could speak, her voice carrying the complex harmonics that seemed common to all in Helheim. "But I have watched your family for generations. You are a seeress," Balder guessed, noting the rune-marked tokens that hung from her belt and the knowing depth in her pale eyes. She inclined her head slightly. "In life, I was called Groa. My prophecies guided kings and commoners alike through the northern lands. In death, I have continued to observe the patterns of fate, though from a different vantage." The name was indeed familiar to Balder, though she had lived and died long before his birth. "Your wisdom is still honored among the Volv of Midgard," he told her. A smile creased her ancient face. "Kind words, though of little consequence now. I come not to speak of my past, but of your future." Balder felt a momentary resistance to this idea. Had he not just released himself from the burden of futures and prophecies? But curiosity overcame this hesitation. What future can there be in the realm of the dead? Roa's laughter was unexpectedly melodic for one so aged in appearance. Death is but another state of being with its own possibilities, its own potential for growth and change. Did you imagine Helheim to be static, unchanging through eternity? She gestured around at the hall, drawing Balder's attention to details he had not fully registered before. Some spirits gathered in what appeared to be classes or discussion groups. Others worked at crafts that produced objects of extraordinary beauty. Tapestries that seemed to move with lives of their own. Sculptures that captured emotions rather than merely physical forms. Instruments that played notes impossible in the living world. Helheim is not an ending but a continuation, Groa explained. Those who accept this truth find themselves evolving beyond what they were in life. Even gods, she added with a meaningful look at Baldur. And what am I to become? He asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier resistance. Groa reached into a small pouch at her waist and withdrew a handful of carved rune stones, which she cast onto the space between them on the bench. They fell in a pattern that apparently held meaning to her practiced eye, for she studied them intently before speaking again. You were the god of light and purity in life, she said finally. Here, you may become something both less and more. The runes suggest a role as bridge keeper, not of physical crossings like Yalabru, but of understanding between realms. She pointed to a specific rune that had landed prominently in the pattern. Manaz. The self, humanity, connection between beings. Combined with Dagaz, breakthrough, transformation. You who have experienced both divine life and true death have perspective unique even among Helheim's residents. Baldur considered this. A mediator of sorts between Helheim and other realms? Perhaps, Groa acknowledged. Though connections between realms are carefully restricted, as you well know. But there are many here who struggle to release their attachments to life, who resist the transformation that death offers. Your presence, your innate radiance that persists even here, may help guide them toward acceptance. As they spoke, Baldur noticed that the lighting in their alcove had subtly increased. Looking down, he realized with surprise that his own form was emitting a soft glow, not the golden radiance that had been his hallmark in life, but a silvery illumination reminiscent of Giol's moonlit waters. Groa nodded as if this confirmed her reading. The light adapts to Helheim's nature, as will all your gifts in time. She gathered her runes, returning them to their pouch with practiced movements. I leave you to consider these possibilities. There is no haste in Helheim. Take the time you need to find your way forward. When you are ready to explore beyond contemplation, seek the Grove of Echoes at the eastern edge of Hela's domain. There, many like yourself have found clarity of purpose. With these words, she rose and departed as quietly as she had arrived, leaving Baldur once more alone with the eternal flame and his thoughts, now turned in new directions. The suggestion that he might still have purpose, still provide service even in death, resonated with his essential nature. In life, Baldur had always found fulfillment in being of use to others, mediating disputes among the Aesir, bringing light to darkened corners of the 9 realms, teaching younger gods the wisdom passed down from earlier generations. Perhaps death need not end this aspect of his existence, but merely transform it, as Groa had suggested. He became aware that the ambient sounds of the Hall of Waiting had shifted subtly. Where before there had been the gentle murmur of countless quiet conversations, now a hush had fallen, broken only by the soft notes of a stringed instrument being played with exquisite skill. Rising from his alcove, Baldur followed the music to its source. In the center of the hall, a circle had formed around a slender figure seated on a simple stool. The musician's fingers moved across the strings of an instrument, similar to the harps of Asgard, but with a voice altogether different. Deeper, more resonant, capable of harmonics impossible on instruments made for living ears. The player was a young woman, her features suggesting she had died in the early spring of her life. Yet her expression held no regret or bitterness as she coaxed sounds of haunting beauty from the strings. The gathered spirits listened with expressions of rapt attention, many with closed eyes, swaying slightly with the melody. Baldur joined the circle, allowing the music to wash over him. The composition spoke of longing without despair, of separation without loss. of endings that contained within them the seeds of new beginnings. It was music that could only have been created in Helheim by one who had fully embraced the perspective that death afforded. When the final notes faded into the hushed atmosphere of the hall, no one spoke or applauded. Such expressions seemed unnecessary, even inappropriate, for the moment of collective experience they had shared. The musician simply nodded once in acknowledgement of her audience, then rose and moved away, disappearing among the gathered spirits. Gradually, normal activities resumed throughout the hall. Conversations rekindled, crafts were returned to, studies continued. But Balder noticed that something had subtly shifted in the atmosphere. The music had created a moment of unity among the diverse inhabitants of Helheim, a reminder of their shared state of being despite their varied origins and experiences. This, too, was part of Helheim's nature, he realized. Not constant sorrow as the living imagined, but moments of profound beauty arising from acceptance of what was, rather than longing for what could no longer be. A figure materialized at his side. Nastrond returned without being summoned. "You begin to see," the guide observed, its shifting features suggesting what might have been a smile. "I begin to," Balder agreed, "though I suspect Helheim contains depths that would take eons to fully comprehend. As does every soul who dwells here," Nastron replied. "Are you ready to venture beyond the Hall of Waiting? There is much more of Helheim to experience, if you wish it." Balder considered this offer. Part of him desired further reflection, more time to fully process the transition he had undergone. But a stronger impulse urged him forward, toward exploration of this realm that would be his home for how long? Until Ragnarok? Until the end of all things? Such questions seemed both urgent and irrelevant in the strange timelessness of Helheim. "Show me," he decided. "Whatever Helheim holds, I would face it with open eyes and willing spirit." Nastrond inclined its head in acknowledgement and led the way toward one of the many archways that opened from the main hall into corridors beyond. As they passed through, Balder glanced back once at the community he was temporarily leaving, the gathered souls, each finding their own path through death's domain, each carrying their own story. In that moment, he felt a strange certainty that he would indeed find purpose here, though perhaps not in the form Groa had envisioned. The specifics mattered less than the principle, that even in death, growth and service remained possible, that existence, in whatever form it took, contained possibilities worth exploring. With this thought to accompany him, Balder followed Nastrond into the deeper realms of Helheim, leaving behind the shores of Gjoll and the crossing that had brought him to this new existence. Ahead lay mysteries and discoveries, challenges and revelations, all part of the journey that continued beyond life's end. The corridor they entered was unlike any in Asgard's golden halls or Midgard's earthen dwellings. Its walls appeared to be carved from a single piece of dark stone shot through with veins of luminous silver that provided soft, shifting illumination. The ceiling arched high above, occasionally opening to reveal not sky, but a strange, swirling expanse that might have been the underside of reality itself. "The passages of reflection," Nastrond explained as they walked. "They connect the various domains of Helheim and change their configuration according to the needs of those who travel them." As if to demonstrate this claim, the corridor ahead curved where moments before it had appeared straight, opening into a small circular chamber with 5 identical archways leading outward in different directions. "Where do you wish to go first?" Nastrond asked. "Helhelm contains many aspects, The fields of rest where most dwell in quiet contemplation, the forests of memory where past experiences can be revisited and reinterpreted, the chasms of transformation where more profound changes occur, the libraries of all knowledge where the wisdom of countless lives is preserved. Balder considered these options, each appealing in its own way. But another possibility, mentioned earlier, resonated most strongly. The Grove of Echoes, he decided, where clarity of purpose might be found. Nastron's form seemed to shimmer with approval, an excellent choice for one newly arrived. The grove has guided many through their initial uncertainty. Without apparent decision or movement, one of the 5 archways began to glow more brightly than the others. Nastron gestured toward it, and they continued their journey through passages that seemed to respond to their presence, widening or narrowing, brightening or dimming as they progressed. Does Helheim reshape itself for all who dwell here? Balder asked as they walked. To varying degrees, Nastrond replied. Those who arrive with rigid expectations often find Helheim equally rigid, conforming to their fears or limited understanding. Those who come with openness, as you have, discover a realm of far greater flexibility and potential. Eventually, the stone passage gave way to a path lined with silver-barked trees whose branches intertwined overhead, creating a canopy that filtered the omnipresent light into dappled patterns. The ground beneath their feet transitioned from smooth stone to a carpet of moss-like growth that released a subtle fragrance with each step. Not flowers or herbs as the living would recognize them, but something uniquely Helheim's own, both comforting and slightly otherworldly. They walked in comfortable silence until the path widened into a clearing unlike anything Balder had expected. The Grove of Echoes proved to be less a traditional forest and more a gathering of ancient massive trees, spaced far enough apart that each stood in splendid isolation, yet close enough that they clearly formed a single community. Each tree was unique in its configuration, some towering straight toward the luminous sky, others spreading wide in elaborate branching patterns, some appearing almost architectural in their precise arrangements of limb and bough. All shared the silver bark he had noted earlier, but their foliage varied dramatically in color and form, creating a tapestry of muted silver, blue, and violet hues. These are not trees as Midgard knows them, Nastrond explained, noting Baldur's fascinated observation. They are more akin to embodied wisdom, perhaps. Each represents the accumulated experience and understanding of countless souls who have passed through Helheim. They do not grow from seed, but from realization. In the center of the grove stood the largest tree of all, a massive presence whose upper branches disappeared into low-hanging mist. At its base, partially embedded in the living wood, was a throne-like seat that appeared to have formed naturally rather than being carved. Seated upon this throne was a figure Baldur recognized immediately, though they had never met in life. Forseti, his own son, god of justice and reconciliation, who had somehow preceded his father into death's realm. The shock of this recognition must have shown on Baldur's face, for Nastrond quickly spoke. Time flows differently between realms, the guide reminded him gently. What seems like moments since your death may represent centuries in the world of the living. Forseti rose from his seat, his expression reflecting the same complex emotions that Baldur himself felt. Surprise, joy, sorrow, all tempered by the perspective that Helheim seemed to grant its inhabitants. He approached with measured steps, his form neither fully solid nor insubstantial, but existing in the same state of in-between that characterized all of Helheim's residents. "Father," he greeted Balder, his voice carrying the same resonant quality that all speech seemed to acquire in this realm. "Your arrival was foretold, though its timing remained uncertain." "My son," Balder responded, embracing him with a gesture that felt both familiar and strange in their new forms. "I did not expect to find you here before me." A smile touched Fossetti's features. "Nor did I expect it myself. The ways of fate are seldom what we anticipate." He gestured around at the grove. "I have found my place here, as keeper of memories and mediator of transitions. Those who struggle to accept their new existence often find their way to me. Like father, like son," Baldur observed, remembering Gro's prediction about his own potential role in Helheim. Fossetti nodded. "The essence of what we are persists beyond death, it seems. My affinity for justice and resolution found new expression here." He turned toward the central tree with its throne-like base. "The grove responds to those who sit beneath the world tree's echo. It shows not the future, for even here that remains unwritten, but possibility, potential, paths that might be walked." "The world tree's echo?" Balder questioned, studying the massive tree with new interest. "A reflection of Yggdrasil," Nasrond explained. "Not the tree itself, which spans all realms, but an echo of its essence within Helheim. It connects all parts of this realm, as the true world tree connects the 9 realms themselves." Fossetti gestured toward the throne. "Will you sit? The grove has awaited your arrival as eagerly as I have, I think." Balder hesitated only briefly before approaching the massive tree. Up close, its bark showed intricate patterns that seemed almost like writing in some ancient, forgotten language. The seat at its base welcomed him, as if designed specifically for his form. As he settled onto the throne, a profound stillness fell over the grove. The ambient sounds, subtle rustling of foliage, distant echoes of voices or music, faded to complete silence. Even the quality of light seemed to change, focusing more intensely around Balder while dimming elsewhere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually he became aware of voices. Whispers at first, coming from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in languages both familiar and utterly foreign. The whispers grew, not in volume but in clarity, until he could distinguish individual voices among the multitude. "The bright one comes at last, the bridge between what was and what will be, bearer of light even in darkness. He who died and yet sees." The voices spoke not to him but about him, as if discussing his nature and potential without awareness of his presence. Some seemed to argue, others to agree, creating a complex tapestry of perspective and expectation that both confused and illuminated. Gradually, certain phrases began to repeat more frequently than others, emerging from the cacophony with increasing clarity. "Guide of the reluctant, mediator between memory and acceptance, light bringer to those lost in transition." With these phrases came images, visions of himself moving among newly arrived souls, his inherent radiance providing comfort to those struggling with the transition from life to death. He saw himself listening to their stories, helping them recognize the meaning in their completed lives and the potential in their new existence. He witnessed moments of profound realization as spirits under his guidance released their final attachments to the living world and embraced what Helheim offered. The visions shifted, showing him working alongside others, Forseti mediating more complex transitions, Groa providing wisdom from her vast experience, even Hela herself acknowledging his unique contribution to her realm's purpose. As suddenly as they had begun, the voices and visions faded, leaving Baldur once more aware of the grove around him. Forseti and Nastrond waited nearby, watching with expressions that suggested they understood something of what he had experienced. "The grove has spoken," Forseti said simply when Baldur rose from the throne. "Did it offer clarity?" Baldur nodded slowly, still processing the experience. "A path, at least. A beginning." He looked at his son with new understanding. "You found similar purpose here?" "Similar but distinct," Forseti confirmed. "Where you may guide those newly arrived, I help resolve the conflicts that sometimes arise among those long resident. Even in death, beings can disagree about interpretation, purpose, meaning. My affinity for justice serves well in such circumstances." Nastrond, who had remained silent during this exchange, now spoke. "The roles we find in Helheim often complement who we were in life, without merely replicating it. Transformation without complete reinvention." Baldur considered this wisdom, finding in it a profound comfort. The essence of who he had been, compassionate, illuminating, helpful, would continue, adapted to this new existence rather than erased by it. Death had changed his circumstances, but not destroyed his fundamental nature. "I am ready," he decided, the certainty of purpose filling him with a sense of rightness that had been absent since his arrival. "Show me where to begin." Forseti smiled, a genuine expression of pleasure that transcended the solemn atmosphere of Helheim. "There are always new arrivals at Yallabru who could benefit from guidance. Some refuse Nastrond's initial assistance, preferring isolation until the reality of their situation fully dawns on them. Others move directly to the Hall of Waiting, but struggle to find their place there." Nastrond nodded in agreement. "Your presence at such transitions might ease the path considerably. The light you still carry, adapted though it is to Helheim's nature, provides reassurance that death is not the end of all brightness." As they spoke, Baldur became aware of a subtle change in the grove around them. The trees seemed to lean slightly inward, their silver foliage rustling without wind, as if expressing approval of the decisions being made beneath their ancient boughs. "The grove concurs," Forseti observed, noticing the same phenomenon. "It responds to alignment between individual purpose and the greater needs of Helheim itself." With their course decided, the three figures moved together toward the path that would lead them back through the passages of reflection to Gjallabru and the shores of Gjall. As they walked, Baldur felt a growing sense of anticipation, not the anxious variety that had characterized his final days of life when prophecies of doom had swirled around him, but a patient, positive expectation of work worth doing and purpose worth fulfilling. Death, he realized, was indeed not an ending, but a transition, a crossing from one state of being to another, with its own challenges, meanings, and potential for growth. As he had crossed Gjall's physical waters, he now crossed a metaphorical river, from confusion to clarity, from loss to new beginning. In this understanding, Baldur found a peace deeper than any he had known in life. Whatever might come, even Ragnarok itself, he would face it with the quiet certainty that existence continued, evolved, transformed, but never truly ended. That was the final wisdom of Helheim, the truth at the heart of the river of quiet echoes, that even in death, purpose and meaning remained for those willing to embrace them. And so, Balder, once god of light and purity, now guide of souls and illuminator of death's path, continued his journey through Helheim's eternal expanse, carrying his adapted radiance into the quiet darkness, creating echoes that would resonate throughout the realm of the dead for ages to come. As Balder's radiance illuminated the quiet paths of Helheim, guiding souls toward acceptance of their new existence, the echoes of his journey rippled outward through the branches of Yggdrasil. The world tree, ancient and all-connecting, carried whispers of his tale through its vast network of roots and branches, spanning all 9 realms. The vibrations traveled upward from the depths where Helheim resided, passing through layers of existence, through Niflheim's primordial mists, through the rocky foundations of Svartalheim, beneath the fertile soils of Midgard. They continued their journey, these subtle reverberations of story and meaning, climbing ever higher through Yggdrasil's massive trunk. Yet not all tales flow upward toward light and revelation. Some stories burrow deeper, seeking the hidden places where secrets gather like fallen leaves. For while Balder found his purpose in the solemn halls of Helheim, other mysteries waited to be discovered in the shadowed realm, where Yggdrasil's roots plunged into the most ancient darkness. There, beneath the ash tree's massive foundations, where soil gives way to something older than Earth itself, whispers of a different kind stirred in the perpetual twilight. These were not the echoes of acceptance and transition that followed Balder's journey across Gjöll, but older murmurings, secrets kept by the roots themselves, stories older than many of the gods, wisdom hoarded in the deepest places of creation. Here, in this liminal space between worlds, another tale waits to unfold, one of hidden knowledge and ancient guardians, of seekers who dare to listen when the roots of Yggdrasil begin to speak. The mists of Niflheim part like gossamer curtains as the traveler descends further into the realm beneath Yggdrasil's lowest root. Here, where the world tree plunges deep into shadow and memory, the air hangs still and cool against the skin, not the biting cold of Jotunheim's glaciers, but the gentle chill of twilight that never quite surrenders to night nor brightens to dawn. Footsteps fall silent upon a carpet of ash-grey leaves, each step releasing the faintest scent of distant wood smoke and something sweeter, perhaps meadowsweet or lavender, though no blooms are visible in this monochrome landscape. The path had begun weeks ago, in truth, though Kari had not recognized it as such. First came the dreams, vivid impressions of wandering beneath strange trees while searching for something precious and unnamed. Then the ravens, 3 mornings in succession, perched on the roof of her cottage as if waiting for her to notice their vigilance. The old belief spoke of ravens as messengers between worlds, particularly those of Odin's realm, but Kari had tried to dismiss such omens as coincidence until the day she found the small, polished stone upon her doorstep, a stone marked with a rune she recognized from the Volva's teachings, Perthro, the rune of fate and mysteries, of things hidden that seek revelation. That night, she had stood beneath the stars, the marked stone clutched in her palm, and whispered a prayer to gods she had privately stopped believing would listen after they took her child. If there is a path, she murmured to the indifferent night sky, show me where it leads. The wind had shifted then, carrying the scent of frost and ancient soil, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf's howl rose and fell like a question seeking answer. The traveler, Kari, pulls her woolen cloak tighter around her shoulders, though the cold here is more memory than sensation. She had not intended to journey this far beneath the 9 realms, yet something calls to her, a whisper just beyond hearing, a name almost remembered but slipping away like water through cupped hands. For 3 nights in the mortal realm, the same dream had visited her. The image of a silver birch tree with roots that spiraled downward into darkness, and a child's voice singing a half-forgotten lullaby. Only in the realm of shadows shall truth be found, the village Volva had told her when Kari sought meaning in these dreams. What you seek lies in Hell's domain, where memory and spirit become one. The ancient seeress had given her a draught of herbs that tasted of earth and starlight, and instructions to lie among the roots of the oldest tree at the edge of the forest when the moon reached its zenith. Kari had followed these directions exactly, feeling the cool soil against her back, watching moonlight filter through branches overhead, until drowsiness overtook her senses. When she opened her eyes again, she was here, descending a path that seemed both eternally old and newly formed with each step she took. Ahead, the forest of ash-white trees thickens, their trunks rise like pale columns supporting an invisible ceiling, their branches reaching outward like fingers seeking to touch one another. From these branches hang leaves that seem more like fragments of parchment than living things, their edges curled and their surfaces etched with what might be runes or simply the natural patterns of decay. They fall occasionally, drifting downward with dreamlike slowness, landing without sound upon the ground where they join countless others. Kari pauses, uncertain which way to proceed. The path that led her here has vanished, replaced by countless possible routes between the spectral trees. As she hesitates, the air before her shimmers like heat rising from summer stones, coalescing into a figure small enough to be a child, but somehow ancient beyond reckoning. "You have come seeking," the figure says, its voice neither male nor female but reminiscent of wind through dry reeds. Its form remains indistinct, a suggestion of humanity rather than a solid presence. Few mortals journey willingly to the roots of the world tree. "I seek answers," Kari replies, surprised to find her voice steady in this unearthly place. "I have dreamed of this realm for 3 nights, and of a song I cannot quite remember." The figure tilts what must be its head, though the gesture is more impression than movement. Names and songs hold power here. To find what you seek, you must follow the echoes of what you once knew. It gestures with a translucent arm toward the depths of the forest. "The path is yours to discover, though I may guide you where memories grow thin." With these enigmatic words, the childlike spirit drifts backward, its form becoming even less substantial until it is merely a disturbance in the air, a ripple in reality that disappears among the trees. Yet Kari senses it has not truly gone, merely shifted beyond her immediate perception, watching with ageless patience. Left with little choice, she continues forward, choosing a path that feels right, though she could not explain why. The ground beneath her feet feels increasingly insubstantial, as if she walks not on earth, but on layers of dreams compressed into something that merely resembles solidity. The trees seem to shift positions when she looks away, creating new arrangements of trunk and branch that subtly alter her course. As she walks, Kari becomes aware of sounds at the very edge of hearing, whispers and fragments of conversation, laughter that might be joyful or mocking, and beneath it all the faint melody that haunted her dreams. The notes drift through the air like the falling leaves, incomplete and elusive, yet achingly familiar. Why does this song call to me? She wonders aloud, her words visible as faint mist in the cool air. Bell songs here are memories, comes a response, though the childlike spirit remains unseen. Someone sang this to you once, or perhaps you sang it to another. The path narrows as Kari continues forward, the ashen trees drawing closer on either side until their branches intertwine overhead, creating a canopy that filters the already diffuse light into patterns that shift and dance upon the ground. These moving shadows seem almost deliberately arranged, forming shapes that resemble runes or pictographs from the oldest stone carvings, images of birth and death, of passage between worlds, of bonds that connect the living and the dead. As she studies these fleeting symbols, Kali becomes aware of figures moving among the trees just beyond clear sight. Shapes that might be human or might be something else entirely. They move with purpose rather than menace, engaged in activities she cannot quite discern, though the impression of ritual and remembrance hangs heavy in the air. Who are they? She asks softly, not wishing to disturb whatever ceremony might be unfolding parallel to her path. The childlike spirit's voice comes from somewhere to her right, though Kari still cannot see its form among the pale trunks. The dwellers in Hell's realm are many and varied. Some are ancestors who feast in halls of memory until their spirits choose rebirth. Some are those who died before their time and linger until what would have been their natural end. Others are guardians and guides, tasked with maintaining the boundaries and passages between worlds. And the unnamed? Kari asks, thinking of her daughter's untethered spirit. Where did... A hesitation follows, brief but noticeable. They drift, the spirit finally answers, its voice tinged with what might be sadness or simply the natural melancholy of this in-between place. Without name or identity to anchor them, they cannot fully enter Hell's realm, nor find their way to halls of feasting or fields of rest. They cannot even form memories of what they were before, or might become after. They simply exist, caught between moments like insects in amber. The thought brings fresh pain to Kari's heart, sharper for the time that has passed since her loss. 5 winters of her daughter's spirit drifting without anchor or home, without even the comfort of memory or anticipation. 5 winters of existence without identity, without connection to the lineage that should have welcomed and protected her. It would be better never to have been born than to exist so, Kari murmurs, more to herself than to her invisible guide. Is that truly what you believe? The spirit's question holds no judgment, only genuine curiosity. That nothingness is preferable to even limited existence. The question catches Kari unprepared, forcing her to examine beliefs she has carried unquestioned since childhood. The old stories spoke of many afterlives, Valhalla for warriors who fell in glorious battle, Folkvanger for those gentle souls chosen by Freya, Hell's realm for most who died of age or illness, Helheim's deepest levels for oath-breakers and kinslayers. But what of those who barely crossed the threshold of life before retreating? What comfort did the old ways offer for such brief, fragile existences? I don't know, she admits finally. I was taught that a life without purpose or connection is no true life at all. But perhaps, she hesitates, reaching for concepts just beyond her grasp. Perhaps even an unnamed existence holds some value, some potential, if only someone remembers. As these words leave her lips, the melody that has haunted her dreams grows suddenly stronger, rising from whisper to clear song, though still without discernible source. It winds through the trees like visible sound, a silver thread that beckons her forward with renewed purpose. The forest opens suddenly into a small clearing, where the ashen trees form a perfect circle around a pool of still water. Unlike the monochrome landscape surrounding it, the pool gleams with a soft silver light that emanates not from its surface, but from somewhere far below. Kari approaches cautiously, drawn by an instinct older than conscious thought. Kneeling at the water's edge, she gazes into depths that should reflect her face, but instead show only swirling patterns of light and shadow. As she watches, these patterns begin to form images, fleeting glimpses of moments she recognizes from her own life, but viewed from outside herself, as if she were a witness rather than participant. There herself as a small child, seated beside a hearth fire, while an older woman, her grandmother, works wool with practiced hands. There, her first hunt, the excitement and terror of tracking a deer through dense forest, the weight of responsibility as she drew back her bow. There, her wedding day, the crown of flowers upon her head, her husband's face, young and unlined by the years of hardship that would follow. And there, a moment she has tried so hard to forget, standing beside a tiny grave as the first winter's snows began to fall, her arms empty of the child who had lived only long enough to draw a few breaths in the mortal world. Kari recoils from this last image, pain fresh as if the loss had occurred yesterday rather than 5 winters past. "Why show me this?" she demands of the silent forest. "I did not come to relive what cannot be changed." The surface of the pool ripples, though no wind disturbs the clearing, and the childlike spirit reappears at its edge, more visible now than before. Its features remain indistinct, but Kari can make out the suggestion of large eyes and a solemn expression. "In Hell's realm, nothing is forgotten," it says simply. "Here, memory is neither burden nor blessing, but simply truth. What you seek lies beyond acceptance of what has been. I have accepted my losses," Kari insists, though even to her own ears the words ring hollow. "I have performed all the proper rites, made offerings to the gods, returned to my life." "There is a difference," the spirit replies gently, "between continuing to live and truly accepting what has passed into shadow. Look again." As the spirit speaks, the forest around them seems to exhale, a collective breath that stirs the ashen leaves into brief, swirling patterns. Kari feels memory rising unbidden, the days after her loss, when she moved through life like a ghost herself, performing necessary tasks with mechanical precision while feeling nothing but the hollow space within her chest where joy had once resided. She had hung herbs to dry, tended her small garden, prepared meals for her husband, spoken the expected words to neighbors who offered condolences. From outside, perhaps it appeared she had returned to life. But in the quiet moments, when darkness pressed against the windows of their cottage and her husband's breathing had deepened into sleep beside her, Kari would lie awake, her hands pressed against her empty womb, reliving those few precious moments when she had held her daughter's too small form, counting fingers and toes that would never grasp or walk, memorizing features that would never change or grow. "I was afraid," Kari admits suddenly, the words surfacing from some deep, unexamined place. Afraid that giving her a name would make the loss more real, more permanent. As if, without a name, she existed in some twilight state, not fully born, not fully gone. She looks up at the childlike spirit, whose features seem to shift between sympathetic and impassive as light moves through the forest. Was that why she could not rest? Because I trapped her between worlds with my fear? Reluctantly, Kari returns her gaze to the pool. The painful image has faded, replaced by another she doesn't immediately recognize, a small bundle wrapped in a blanket she herself had woven during her pregnancy, held in arms she knows are her own, though her face remains outside the vision's frame. Her lips move in the reflection, singing words she cannot hear, but whose rhythm matches the elusive melody that has haunted her dreams. "You never sang the naming song," the spirit observes, its voice soft as falling leaves. The child passed to Hell's realm without a name to anchor its spirit. The revelation falls upon Kari like stones, each one a memory she had tried to bury beneath the soil of daily existence. She remembers now the chaos and grief of that day, how the birthing had come too early, how the midwife's face had fallen when the child emerged blue and struggling, how her grandmother, still alive then, her last year among the living, had insisted they could save the infant with swift action and the old ways. The memories flow faster now, unspooling like thread from a spindle. Her grandmother preparing herbs and warm compresses, murmuring incantations to Frigg and Ea. The midwife working with practiced hands to clear the child's mouth and nose. Kari herself drifting between consciousness and darkness, weakened by blood loss and the effort of bringing forth life too soon. She remembers her grandmother placing the swaddled infant in her arms, urging her to hold her daughter close to her heart. Speak to her, the old woman had insisted. Let her hear her mother's voice to guide her, whether she stays or goes. And Kari had tried, had whispered words of welcome and love, had hummed fragments of lullabies whose lyrics escaped her exhausted mind. But when the tiny form had grown still, despite all their efforts, when the midwife had gently taken the bundle from her arms, Kari had turned her face to the wall and surrendered to merciful unconsciousness. What followed were days of fever, her body fighting the infection that had perhaps precipitated the early birth. By the time she regained full awareness, the child had been prepared for burial, the small grave already dug at the edge of the village burial ground where unnamed infants and stillborn babes were traditionally laid to rest. Her husband had asked, voice rough with his own grief, if she wished to name the child before the final rites. Kari, still wrapped in the fog of fever and loss, had shaken her head. What use was a name for one who had never drawn proper breath, never opened eyes to the world? The thought had formed from pain rather than wisdom, a desperate attempt to minimize what could not be diminished. I thought I was being practical, Ari whispers, the words barely disturbing the air around her. But I was being a coward. The realization strikes Kari with physical force, driving breath from her lungs. It was true. Her daughter had been born too early, too fragile for the mortal world. In the shock and grief that followed, the naming ceremony had never been performed. According to the old beliefs, a soul without a name would wander lost between worlds, unable to find peace in life or death. This is why I've been called here, Kari whispers, understanding blooming like the first spring flower after winter's retreat. My child's spirit cannot rest without a name. The childlike spirit neither confirms nor denies this conclusion, merely gesturing toward a new path that has appeared at the far side of the clearing. Unlike the way she had come, this trail is marked by small stones that emit the same silver light as the pool, creating a luminous thread through the ashen forest. Follow the path of remembrance, the spirit instructs. It will lead you where you need to go. As Kari rises and approaches the new path, the spirit flickers like a candle flame in a sudden draft, then vanishes entirely. Yet the sense of being watched, of being guided, remains. She follows the glowing stones, aware that the forest around her grows both denser and somehow more transparent, as if the trees themselves are becoming memories of trees rather than solid forms. The melody grows stronger as she walks, no longer fragmentary but flowing in a continuous stream that seems to emanate from the path itself. Kari recognizes it now, a cradle song her own mother had sung to her, and her mother before that, passed down through generations of women in her family. Without conscious decision, she begins to hum along, then to sing the words that return to her lips as if they had never been forgotten. Sleep now, little one, beneath the watchful stars, safe in mother's arms till soul's golden light returns. Dream of Freya's meadows where flowers never fade. Dream of Odin's wisdom and tales yet to be told. Sleep now, little one, till shadows turn to dawn. Your name is written in my heart where it shall ever bloom. As the last note fades into the still air, Kari realizes the path has led her to another clearing. This one dominated by a single tree, unlike any she has seen before. It stands taller than its companions, its trunk the pale silver of moonlight on snow, its branches extending outward and upward like protective arms. Instead of the parchment-like leaves of the other trees, this one's branches are adorned with tiny stars that emit a gentle, pulsing light, in rhythm with the cradle song that still echoes in the clearing. Beneath this tree sits a figure that makes Kari's heart constrict with recognition and longing. Her grandmother, dead these 15 winters, appears exactly as Kari remembers her. Silver hair braided in the traditional style, hands never idle as they work a spindle of invisible thread. She looks up as Kari approaches, her weathered face breaking into the smile that had always made her stern features beautiful. "You have come a long way, child," the old woman says, her voice exactly as Kari remembers, like smooth stones polished by running water. "Sit with me a while." Kari moves forward as if in a dream, lowering herself to sit on the soft ground beside this impossible vision. "Grandmother," she manages, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you real, or merely a phantom of this place?" The old woman's laugh is startlingly genuine in this realm of whispers and half-truths. "What is real in a land of shadows? I am as real as memory allows me to be." She sets aside her ghostly spinning and fixes Kari with a penetrating gaze. "But you did not journey all this way to speak with an old woman long in her grave." "I didn't know why I came," Kari admits. "Only that dreams called me here, and a song I couldn't fully remember." Her grandmother nods as if this makes perfect sense. "The unfinished ritual drew you. A soul unbound by name cannot cross into hell's halls to feast with ancestors, nor can it return to be reborn in the world above. It drifts between, like mist that neither rises to become cloud nor settles as dew upon the earth." "My daughter," Kari whispers, giving voice to the understanding that has been growing within her since she gazed into the silver pool. "I never gave her a name. I thought, it wouldn't matter, as she had already left us. Names matter beyond life and death," her grandmother says, her tone gentle but firm. "They are how we recognize ourselves, and how others recognize us. In this world, and all others." "Can it be remedied?" Kari asks, hope and dread mingling in her chest. "Can I still give her a name after all this time?" The old woman's eyes grow distant, as if seeing beyond the clearing and its starry tree to some truth Kari cannot perceive. Hell's realm exists outside mortal time. Here, what has been and what might be flow together like tributaries joining a greater river. The question is not whether you can, but whether you are prepared for what follows. I am, Kari says without hesitation. Whatever it requires. Her grandmother studies her face for a long moment, then nods once, apparently satisfied by what she sees there. The forest knows why you have come. Look. She gestures toward the base of the starry tree, where the earth has begun to pulse with the same silver light as the pool in the previous clearing. As Kari watches, the light gathers intensity, coalescing into a small, distinct shape. At first, it appears to be merely another stone marking a path, but as it solidifies further, she recognizes the unmistakable form of an infant, curled as if in peaceful sleep. The sight brings her to her knees, a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp escaping her lips. Is this... She cannot complete the question, overwhelmed by what she sees before her. A projection, a memory, an echo. Her grandmother replies, her own voice thick with emotion. In this place, the boundaries between such things mean little. What matters is that here, now, you may complete what was left unfinished. Kayan. Kari moves closer to the luminous child shape, scarcely daring to breathe. It appears so real she can almost believe she would feel warm skin and the rise and fall of breath if she were to reach out and touch it. Yet there is an ethereal quality to the vision that reminds her she kneels not in the mortal world, but in a realm where spirit and memory take physical form. What must I do? She asks, looking back at her grandmother for guidance. You know the ritual, the old woman replies. I taught it to your mother, who taught it to you. The words remain in your heart, even if they have been silent on your tongue. And Kari does know. The naming ceremony is one of the oldest traditions of her people, performed 9 days after a child's birth, when its grip on life is deemed secure enough to be recognized by gods and community alike. Words spoken beneath open sky, water from a sacred spring touched to forehead and lips, a name pronounced 3 times to root it firmly in the child's soul. Here, in this place beyond places, sky and sacred spring may be absent, but perhaps they are unnecessary. Perhaps intent and memory are enough, where the barriers between worlds grow thin. Slowly, reverently, Kari begins to speak the ancient words, surprised to find they flow from her lips without hesitation or error, as if she had performed this ceremony 100 times rather than merely witnessed it. From the void of Ginnungagap came all that is and all that shall be. From the meeting of fire and ice, of light and shadow, of breath and silence, life emerges to weave its thread into the tapestry of worlds. As she speaks, the air around them thickens, gathering weight and presence, until it feels as if an audience of countless unseen witnesses surrounds them. The starry tree's light intensifies, its tiny celestial fruits pulsing in harmony with her words. I call upon the ancient powers to witness this naming, Kari continues, her voice growing stronger. Upon Frigg, who knows the fate of all but speaks it not. Upon Freya, in whose meadows the worthy find rest. Upon Sol, whose light nourishes all living things. The luminous form before her seems to grow more distinct, features becoming visible where before there was only suggestion, tiny fingers curled into fists, the curve of rounded cheeks, eyelids closed in peaceful slumber. Kari removes her cloak and spreads it on the ground, then gently, carefully, lifts the glowing child, shape, and places it on this makeshift cradle. The sensation is strange, not quite solid, yet possessing weight and substance, like holding a vessel filled with light. Please, I name you Lif, she pronounces, the name rising from some deep well of certainty within her. For you are life, even beyond death. I name you Lif that you may be known to yourself and to all who meet you in any realm. I name you Lif, daughter of Kari, descendant of a line unbroken since the first dawn. With each repetition of the name, the child's luminescence shifts, becoming less ethereal and more defined, though still composed more of light than flesh. Kari feels tears tracking down her cheeks, but they are not the bitter tears of grief that have been her companions these past seasons. These fall warm and cleansing, like spring rain that awakens dormant seeds. She becomes aware that she is no longer alone with her grandmother and the newly named child. The childlike spirit that first greeted her in this realm has reappeared, now standing at the edge of the clearing. But unlike before, its form has gained definition. It appears now as a young girl of perhaps 4 or 5 winters, with features that strike Kari with the force of recognition. Her own eyes, her husband's nose, and determined chin. This is how she would have looked, her grandmother says softly, following Kari's gaze, had she grown in the world above. The spirit child approaches slowly, moving with the deliberate care of someone crossing a stream on stepping stones. When she reaches the place where Kari kneels beside the infant form, she extends a small hand to touch the glowing bundle. "Sister," she says, the word both statement and question. Kari looks to her grandmother in confusion. "I don't understand. I lost only one child." The old woman's expression turns complicated, compassion mingled with some deeper knowledge that shadows her eyes. "Time moves differently here, as I told you. What has been and what might be flow together. This spirit has never lived in your world, yet exists here as possibility. The child you might have borne had grief not closed your heart to new life." The revelation leaves Kari breathless, her mind struggling to comprehend what her grandmother suggests. A second child, one never conceived because she had withdrawn from her husband in sorrow, focused only on what was lost rather than what might still be found. The spirit child seems untroubled by these complex implications. She continues to gaze at the infant with undisguised fascination. "I will show her the paths," she announces with childlike certainty, "when she is ready to journey." "Journey where?" Kari asks, looking between the luminous infant, the spirit child, and her grandmother. "To the halls of hell, where she will feast with ancestors until the time comes for rebirth," her grandmother explains. "Or perhaps to Folkvanger, where Freya welcomes those of gentle spirit. The choice will be hers, now that she carries a name." The spirit child nods solemnly in agreement. "Names are maps," she says, with the peculiar wisdom children sometimes possess. "Without one, you cannot find your way home, nor can others find you." Kari reaches out hesitantly toward this apparition of what might have been. To her surprise, her fingers make contact with what feels like actual flesh, cool but undeniably present. The spirit child accepts this touch without comment, as if being reached across worlds is an everyday occurrence. "Will I see you again?" Kari asks, uncertain whether she addresses the infant, the spirit child, or both. "It depends," her grandmother answers instead, "on whether you choose to remember or to forget when you return to the world above." "I don't wish to forget," Kari insists. "These memories are precious, even in their sorrow." Her grandmother smiles, the expression transforming her features into the loving face Kari remembers from earliest childhood. There is wisdom in that choice. Memory keeps doors between worlds from closing completely. She reaches out to touch Kari's forehead in blessing. But now, child, your time in this realm grows short. The naming is complete. The unfinished ritual has found its conclusion. As if summoned by these words, the forest around them begins to shift. The ashen trees seem to recede, their trunks becoming transparent, revealing glimpses of other landscapes beyond. Sunlit meadows, towering mountains, stormy seas. Only the starry tree remains solid and unchanging. Its light a constant against the dissolving scenery. What's happening? Kari asks, though she suspects she already knows the answer. The forest returns you to your world, the spirit child explains, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. Dreams cannot last beyond waking. The infant form of life has begun to change as well, its glow intensifying until looking directly at it becomes difficult. Within this radiance, Kari glimpses movement, tiny hands reaching upward, eyes opening to reveal irises the color of twilight sky. And see? She sees you, her grandmother says softly. She knows her mother and her name. That knowledge will travel with her, wherever her spirit journeys next. Tears flow freely down Kari's face now, but she makes no move to wipe them away. Will she be born again? Will I know her if she returns to the world? Her grandmother's expression turns gentle. Such knowledge is not granted, even to those who dwell in hell's realm. But connections of the heart are not easily severed. In this world or any other, what is truly loved leaves an imprint that transcends death and birth alike. The dissolving forest accelerates its transformation, patches of familiar landscape appearing with greater frequency between the vanishing trees. Kari recognizes the ancient oak at the edge of her village, its roots exactly where she had lain down to drink the Volva's potion. The mortal world calls her back with increasing urgency. I'm not ready, she protests, though she can feel her consciousness already beginning to shift, to rise toward waking. The spirit child approaches, standing directly before Kari with solemn eyes, too wise for her apparent age. You were brave to come, she says, brave to remember, brave to name. The roots remember courage. She leans forward and places a kiss on Kari's forehead, her touch cool as starlight. Listen for us in the wind, watch for us in dreams. We will be waiting, her grandmother adds, her form beginning to fade into transparency like the trees around them. When your time comes to cross between worlds once more, the infant life gives one final pulse of brilliant light, so intense that Kari must close her eyes against it. When she opens them again, she feels cool moss beneath her back and sees dappled sunlight filtering through the branches of the ancient oak tree. Morning has come to the mortal world, dew glistening on grass and leaf like scattered diamonds. Kari sits up slowly, her body stiff, as if she has truly walked for hours rather than lain dreaming beneath the tree. Yet she knows immediately that what she experienced was more than ordinary dream. The certainty sits in her chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of understanding outward through her being. She had journeyed to the roots of Yggdrasil, to the borders of Hell's realm where memory and spirit intertwine. She had given her daughter a name, life, completing the ritual left unfinished in the mortal world. And in doing so, she had glimpsed not only what was lost, but what might yet be found. Rising to her feet, Kari brushes leaves and moss from her clothing. The village lies just beyond the next rise, smoke from morning fires already rising toward a sky washed clean by night. Her husband will be awake by now, perhaps wondering at her absence, though she had left word with a neighbor that she sought the Volva's counsel for a private matter. As she begins the walk homeward, Kari becomes aware of something clutched in her right hand. Opening her fingers, she finds a single leaf unlike any she has seen in the forests near her village. Pale as bone, delicate as parchment, yet somehow unbreakable when she tests its strength between her fingers. Its surface bears intricate patterns that might be natural veining or might be runes, depending on how the light catches them. A token from the ashen forest, proof that her journey was no mere fantasy. Kari tucks this treasure carefully into the pouch at her belt. There will be time later to create a proper reliquary for it, perhaps a small wooden box carved with protective symbols. For now, it is enough to carry this fragment of another realm close to her heart as she returns to the rhythms and responsibilities of mortal life. The path home seems shorter than usual, or perhaps it is merely that Kari's steps have gained new purpose. The weight of unresolved grief that has bent her shoulders these past seasons feels transformed, not absent, for loss leaves its mark in ways that can never be fully erased, but transmuted into something that strengthens rather than diminishes. As she crests the final rise and sees her village spread before her in the morning light, Kari finds herself humming the cradle song that had guided her through the ashen forest. The melody feels different on her tongue now, no longer a source of pain, but a thread connecting worlds, a reminder that some bonds transcend the boundaries between life and death. At the edge of the village, she pauses, looking back toward the ancient oak now hidden behind the slope she has descended. For an instant, she thinks she sees two figures standing beneath its spreading branches, a woman with silver hair and the small form of a child. But when she blinks, there is only the tree, solid and unchanged for generations. "Until we meet again," Kari whispers, the words carried away by a breeze that smells faintly of wood smoke and something sweeter, perhaps meadowsweet or lavender. Then she turns and walks the final distance to her home, where, for the first time in too long, she will speak to her husband of future possibilities rather than past sorrows. Life continues its spiral through seasons of darkness and light. What was broken can never be made exactly whole again, but there are many kinds of wholeness, and some can only be discovered after passing through shadow. In the coming nights, Kari will dream of an ashen forest where a child named Lif walks hand in hand with a sister who might yet be born into the world above. She will wake from these dreams not with tears but with a sense of peace, of boundaries crossed and healing found in the spaces between worlds, where memory and hope intertwine like the roots of Yggdrasil itself. The seasons will turn as they always have, summer surrendering to autumn's golden embrace, autumn yielding to winter's crystalline grip, winter relenting to spring's persistent awakening. With each passing moon, Kari will find herself more fully present in the world of the living, rediscovering joys she had thought lost forever, the satisfaction of bread baked to perfect golden brown, the comfort of her husband's calloused hand wrapped around her own, the simple pleasure of watching clouds form and dissolve against the vast blue canvas of sky. When the anniversary of her journey to the ashen forest arrives, marked by the first snowfall of winter, Kari will return to the ancient oak tree at the edge of the village. She will bring with her a small wooden box, lovingly carved with protective runes and symbols of rebirth. Inside rests the pale leaf from Hell's realm, preserved unchanged despite the passing of seasons, and beside it, a lock of her own hair and a tiny cup of mead, offerings to those who dwell between worlds. The village Volva will find her there at twilight, the old seeress's eyes knowing as she observes the careful placement of the box among the oak's massive roots. No words will pass between them, but understanding flows nevertheless. Acknowledgement of thresholds crossed and wisdom earned. That night, as Kari sleeps beside her husband beneath furs and woolen blankets, snow will continue to fall outside their cottage, transforming the familiar landscape into something new and unmarked. And in her dreams, she will once more walk the paths between worlds, this time not as supplicant or seeker, but as honored guest. The ashen forest will welcome her with whispers of recognition, its pale trees bowing slightly as she passes. The childlike spirit, now clearly recognizable as the daughter who might yet be born, will skip beside her, leading the way to a clearing Kari has not seen before. Here, beneath a dome of stars brighter and more numerous than any visible from Midgard, a long table stretches laden with feast foods and surrounded by figures of all ages. At the head of this table sits her grandmother, silver hair elaborately braided and adorned with gleaming ornaments. Beside her, in a chair raised to accommodate her small stature, sits Lif, no longer an infant, but a child of perhaps 3 winters, her eyes bright with recognition as Kari approaches. "Mother," the child will greet her, the word both familiar and strange on such young lips. "You have returned as promised," and there at the table of ancestors, neither fully in the world of the living nor completely surrendered to death, Kari will celebrate the connections that transcend ordinary boundaries of existence. She will listen to stories of those who came before her and those who might follow, will share mead from cups that never empty, and will add her voice to songs older than memory itself. When dawn approaches in the world above, the feast will draw to its natural close. Her grandmother will rise from her place, coming to embrace Kari with arms that feel surprisingly solid in this realm of spirits and memory. "You have done well," the old woman will tell her, pride evident in her voice. "The healing you have found is not just for yourself or for your children, but for our entire lineage. What was broken now mends." Life will approach then, taking Kari's hand in her small one. "I cannot go with you yet," she will explain with that same uncanny wisdom. "My place is here until the wheel turns again, but I am no longer lost." Understanding that this is both farewell and promise, Kari will kneel to embrace her daughter properly, memorizing the feel of small arms around her neck, the scent of star-kissed hair, the weight and warmth of the child against her heart. "Until we meet again," she will whisper, echoing words spoken months before at the edge of her village. "Until we meet again," Lif will confirm, stepping back to stand beside her great-grandmother as the ashen forest begins its now familiar dissolution, reality blurring around the edges as Kari's consciousness rises toward waking. When she opens her eyes to morning light filtering through frost-covered windows, the memory of the dream will remain vivid and complete, lacking the fragmentation that usually accompanies the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Beside her, her husband still slumbers, his breathing deep and even, his face relaxed in ways she has not seen since before their loss. Without waking him, Kari will rise and move to the small shrine in the corner of their main room, where she has maintained a modest fire through the night in honor of ancestors and household spirits. To the flickering flames she will add a pinch of dried lavender and a drop of honey, offerings to those who dwell between worlds. "Thank you," She will whisper to beings both seen and unseen, her words carrying the weight of profound understanding. For what was, what is, and what may yet be. In the months that follow, as winter gives way to spring's first tentative stirrings, Kari's body will begin its own renewal. The seed planted during her husband's loving embraces takes root and grows, nurtured by a heart now healed enough to welcome new life without fear or reservation. When she shares the news with him, his joy will be tempered by cautious concern, memories of past sorrow still fresh for them both. This child will have its own path, Kari will reassure him, her hand resting protectively over the still flat plain of her stomach, where new life has just begun its journey. And we will walk beside it for as long as the gods allow, whether that be days or decades. As her belly swells with the passing moons, Kari will continue her quiet rituals of remembrance, maintaining the delicate balance between honoring what was lost and embracing what has been given. She will speak often to the growing life within her, telling stories of ancestors and spirits, of the world tree in its many realms, of an older sister named Life, who dwells in a forest of ash and starlight, waiting for her proper time. And when the summer solstice brings the longest day of the year, Kari will give birth to a daughter, with eyes blue as twilight sky, and a birthmark on her shoulder shaped like an ash leaf. When the midwife places the squalling infant in her arms, Kari will feel a sense of completion that transcends ordinary joy, the closing of a circle begun in sorrow and completed in hope. 9 days later, with the entire village gathered to witness, she and her husband will perform the naming ceremony beneath open sky, water from a sacred spring touching forehead and lips, ancient words spoken with perfect clarity. I name you Embla, Kari will pronounce 3 times, the name rising from the same well of certainty that gave life her identity. For you are born of ash and earth, of memory and promise. The name echoes that of the first woman in the old creation stories, formed by the gods from an ash tree by the shore. A beginning that follows ending, hope that grows from loss. The gathered villagers will murmur approval, but Kari's attention will be drawn to the edges of the crowd, where, just for a moment, she glimpses 2 figures watching with unmistakable joy. An old woman with silver-braided hair, and a small child whose features mirror those of the infant in her arms. They raise their hands in blessing before fading into the summer haze, returning to the realm where they wait and watch. That night, as her husband sleeps and newborn Embla nurses contentedly at her breast, Kali will look toward the window, where stars glimmer against the velvet darkness. The boundaries between worlds seem especially thin in such quiet moments, when most of humanity sleeps, and dreams form bridges across otherwise impassable chasms. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between dusk and true darkness, she will sing the ancient cradle song and feel, in the deepest chambers of her heart, that somewhere beyond mortal hearing, 2 small voices join in harmony with her own, one that will someday join her in the world above, and one that waits patiently among the whispers beneath the ashen roots. Our Viking tale has now concluded. You will now hear the peaceful sounds of a crackling fire and gentle ambient noises that will continue throughout the night without any interruptions, helping you drift into a deep and restful sleep. May the stars of the northern sky watch over you, and may you find peaceful rest until the morning light. Sleep well, and good night.